This hand of the week comes from the final table of the 10k Mystery Bounty event at EPT Prague. This was a small field event with 56 runners, and only the final table of 8 are paid. That is also when the bounties kick in, and just over half the prize pool goes towards the bounty prize pool. Now, this is a very different structure to the large field 3k event, where over a third of the field still remain when the bounties kick in, and just over a third of the prize pool goes towards the bounty prize pool. In the 3k, the bounties are worth less than a starting stack, whereas we can see here in the 10k, they are worth over 4 starting stacks, so players will need to gamble much wider for bounties. And it folds to Paul Newey in the hijack, who's the shortest stack at the table with 5 big blinds. Now, it's a very shallow final table. There are 4 players with 10 big blinds or less, so Newey does need to consider ICM, but King-Queen suited is clearly strong enough to go with here. Now, Gutierrez in the small blind has an interesting decision. You can see with the mystery bounty being worth 427,000, he needs to call 180,000 to win a pot that would effectively be 907,000 chips. So that means he needs 20% equity. However, of course, he does have the chip leader behind him in the big blind, so he does need to proceed with caution. But he decides to call with the 10 deuce off, and Vasilchenko, the big stack in the big blind, makes a tight fold with king 3 off. So if we plug this hand into Hold'em Resources calculator, then we can see Newey shoves a very tight range. That's because he has no fold equity. So something like this seems realistic. And then if we give the small blind the option to either shove or call, you can see we should be proceeding about 44% of the time. A hand like 10 deuce off is just much too weak to continue. Although it does obviously depend on the big blind. If they are going to play very tight, as they did in game, then perhaps these hands are okay to call. You can see the sim strategy is to call with hands like 9s plus as traps and a few strong hands here, and then just lots of mediocre hands just trying to win the bounty. And then shoving with hands like Ace-X and King-X, suited broadways, pairs, suited connectors. And if we do call, we can see that the big blind should be continuing over 80% of the time. Against a call, it just likes to shove hands like Ace-X and King-X. See, King 3 off suit is almost pure shoving. And it should, if we don't shove, we should at least call with it. So that's a pretty big mistake. You can see even hands like 5-3 offsuit can be called, just because the bounty's worth so much, and we do also cover the small blind if we do get it all in against the small blind. And we can see if the small blind hand folded, then the big blind should just call any 2 cards. And that's because with the bounty out there, we only need about 18% equity, and even 7 deuce off here is getting 27.5% against this tight hijack range. So if we just simplify the spot and just make it a shove-only spot, even then the small blind can rejam 38% of the time. And that's because the bounties are just worth so much. We can see here they're worth 35,000 euros. And that's a lot more than most of these pay jumps. So really the value in this final table is just trying to be a big stack and trying to win all the bounties, because the bounty prize pool is worth 280,000 euros, which is about 4 times first place prize money. And we also have to remember that all the players already have the min cash locked up, so if you take that away from the payouts here, there's even less money to play for. So ICM is just much less of a consideration than a normal tournament. And we can see actually if we switch the stacks from in the blinds round, so we make the small blind the bigger stack and the big blind the slightly shorter stack, can see that the small blind should rejam 69% of the time instead of 38% of the time. And that's as much to do with we now cover the big blind, so we don't mind as much when we get it all in against him, because we can now win 2 bounties. It's less because of ICM, because if we do lose this pot, we'll be the shortest stack and we'll probably go out next anyway. So it's just, ICM is just much less of a consideration than a normal tournament. So this final table is a good example of how aggressively we want to hunt for bounties, depending on the structure. In a large field event like the World Series of Poker in the Bahamas, by the time you get to the final table, the bounties are worth hardly any big blinds. They're worth, one big blind or less. Whereas here, just so much of the prize pool is in the bounties that we almost just forget ICM and just go bounty hunting.